One of the biggest selling points in CS5 isn't a brand new feature, but the vast improvement of an existing one. If you've ever spent hours separating strands of hair from a background, you will be absolutely drooling over the revamped Refine Edges feature. Let's get started in our Chapter 4 folder, and let's open the file Refine Edges. In this image, what we'd like to do is cut the boy out from his original background and replace that background with this beach scene. So we're going to have to make a selection and silhouette the boy and allow that beach scene to show through instead of this plain boring background. We're going to begin with our quick selection tool. Mine is already selected. If yours is not, simply press W on the keyboard. I'm going to increase the brush size here by pressing the right bracket key. I'm going to make this fairly large because even though we ultimately want the boy selected, it's going to be much quicker and easier to select the background and then invert our selection. I'll show you how to do that. But before we get started, I want you to go up to the options bar and make sure that you have the Auto Enhance feature activated. Make sure that there's a check in that box. This will give you a much more precise selection. Now, because we're going to select the background, we simply start painting over the background area. And you can see how the quick selection tool is doing a fairly reasonable job of not cutting too much into the boy here. Okay, let's zoom in and take a closer look at this selection. I'll reduce my brush size with the left bracket key here. This is cut in too far, so I'm going to hold down the Alt key on Windows, Option key on a Mac, and simply deselect that area there. That looks much better. Let's take a look at this side. Again, it threw off our quick selection a bit, so I'm going to hold down the Option key on a Mac, Alt key on Windows, and just make sure that we are not spilling over into this collar area. There's another little spot we need to get rid of. And now we're looking pretty good. Again, this is not going to be our final selection. We're going to have an opportunity to go in and fine-tune this, but it is worth taking a few moments at this point just to go in and clean up any glaring mistakes. I'm going to zoom back out here. I'm going to hit Control 0 on Windows, Command 0 on a Mac. Now, because we want the boy selected and not the background selected, we need to go up to the Select menu and choose Inverse. Now we have a nice outline around the boy. Now, the hair is obviously going to be an issue here. At this early stage, you don't need a super precise selection yet. You just want to have a selection of the bulk of the area that you're ultimately going to be working with. So we don't need to go and worry about individual loose strands of hair quite yet, but we just want to make sure that we've got the majority of the image area that we want to work with selected. Now we're ready to bring up the new Refine Edge dialog box. So we'll simply click here in the options bar. And the very first thing I want to show you here is that we have a number of very useful view modes. If I click here, you can see that we could view the image in marching ants mode with a red overlay. We could view it on black. We could view it on white. But here's what's really fantastic and will save you a lot of time. We have an on layers option, and when I click here, that's right, it lets our bottom layer show through so that we can actually work on this silhouette while viewing the layer that we are going to use. So if you're starting with an image and you know the background that you're ultimately going to be placing it on, bring that background layer into the file, stick it below your top layer, and choose this on layers mode. This is going to be a huge time saver because you can be editing on this white background, for instance, and your results may look significantly different when you replace it with your final background because the colors will simply be different. Notice that each of these view modes has a keyboard shortcut. On layers is L. You can also press the F key to cycle through these views individually. So we're going to stick with on layers mode here. Now if we zoom in to 100% here, that's Control 1 on Windows, Command 1 on a Mac, you can see that our selection is very rough and leaves a lot to be desired. But here's how we're going to start to fix it. Under these Adjust Edge options, we've got a Smooth feature. And I'm going to drag smoothing out right about there. Looks pretty good. And you can see it's better. It's not 100% fixed, but at least it's smoothing the difference between what we've selected and what we haven't selected. Now let's go and work with this feather feature. If I bring feathering out, I'm going to go just above a pixel here. Maybe right about there. And again, we're getting a more subtle, gradual, and natural looking result. But overall, you can see that our selection is really leaving too much of our original background here. So what we want to do is actually have this selection cut more into this boy's face and along his body. So we're going to go to Shift Edge, and we're going to move this slider down to the left, right about there, and you can see immediately that we have a much nicer selection along here. I'm going to show you our original here. You can check this Show Original box, or you can simply use the shortcut P. Here's the selection that we started with, and just by moving a few sliders, we can get to that.